Welcome everyone to this week in Svelte, episode 81. Today we have a community showcase, which is always a happy day for me when we have a community showcase. And but there's also a small announcement. I guess you already know, but there is a small announcement, and obviously the changelog. I'm Paolo. I will be your host for today, and let's jump right into it. So let's begin with the changelog. We have quite a bit to talk about. There were like 3-4 release, but a lot of stuff. So ensure source and file name are known to compile module source map. Yeah, just source map. If you're not aware, source map are basically stuff that help you like determine after a transformation has happened. It helps tools understand where the code that you are actually running was transformed to, so that they can give you precise information about where the error is generating, which is pretty cool. This is cleanup known branch effects created inside block effects. It was basically a bug because if you create an effect inside a block, it was not cleaned up, so it will never call the cleanup function for that effect. Because obviously for generally block effect, so the effects that are created by Svelte inside an if block don't need to be like rerun every time, but user effect should. So do not rerun each block when array change from empty to empty. So nice, nice thing. It's maybe a silly it's nice because there's all this stuff that adds up. So like it may seem silly, like what happens if you rerun each block when you change from empty to empty, but all these small things adds up performance wise. Ensure effect destroy owned derives upon teardown, which is also something. So if you have some derived inside an effect, yeah, on teardown, those effect destroyed derives, which is interesting. I thought we already had this, but it's fine. Ensure proxied arrays correctly update their length upon deletions. This was a fun bug because this usually doesn't happen because if you run in an effect which is asynchronous, like it runs the next microtick, it's fine, but inspect run synchronously. So if you were, for example, slicing an array, you would actually get one update for every element that was removed. Avoid assigning input value if the value is the same to fix min length. This was such a weird edge case for min length, because I don't know if you know about this, but min length actually only applies if you touch the input. So let's say that you have Svelte 5 blah 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 and you have an input. You may think that if you have a min length of 1 on an input, this will prevent the form submission if you don't have at least one character. But that's just not true. Like if you never touch it, it will actually submit the form, because this only applies if you actually submit a form. And so let's try to refresh to get the dark mode here. Sometimes it's broken. Okay, so if you start writing something, it will actually should prevent you from doing so. I guess that's the other caveat. Basically, it doesn't work if the value is set with JavaScript, which is super weird. It's not super weird. It's kind of correct, but it's a weird edge case, and I don't know why now it's not working, because this should work. Maybe I wrote this, maybe it's just mean. I can't remember. Min length, maybe it's the opposite. I always forget. Min length 10. Sorry, let's try this. No, it's still, I don't know. It should work. When migrating Svelte self, I don't think required is needed. Like you can have a min length of 10, and if you have, let me see on CodePen, because we might have another bug in Svelte. I don't think, but we might. Let's see. So if we have a form and a form with an input min length is equal to 10, and a button, go, let's try. So if I try to do this, yeah, this tell you need at least 10 character. But the weird part is that if you do this, so let's change it. Now this does not have a min length of 10, but if I try to submit, it's still submitting it. And this is because like if you don't touch it, it's still not taking into consideration min length. And the same thing is if you have an ID, for example, input like this, and you do input.value is equal myval. Like this is less than 10, but since the value is added with JavaScript, if you try to submit, it's still submitting. And obviously Svelte, it's a JavaScript language, so it was updating the input with JavaScript, but the fix was to prevent input value to be set if the value is already dead. So basically when Svelte tries to set if Svelte tries to set the value on the input before it checks, okay, what's the current value? If it's already dead, I will not touch it with JavaScript, so that min length can actually work. This is another nice thing, is that when we are migrating Svelte self, so I don't know if you saw it, but basically if you have Svelte, let's do if false Svelte self, otherwise we will run in an infinite loop. So Svelte self is deprecated, and as you can see, like you can use self import, which means you can do import up from up.svelte instead. So before we were migrating Svelte self, but we were migrating to a component like this, Svelte self, for example. But now we actually have the file like the component name, and so we can do this, and we actually import up from up.svelte, and we show up instead of something funky, which is nice. Like it provides a better migration output. Strip bomb characters from input. This is also I actually don't know what this is about. Like bomb characters are specific characters of the Unicode, I guess, and they were causing problems in some specific situation. Specifically, I guess for the parser. So we are using Acorn to parse the code, and it was creating some problem, if I remember correctly. So add hidden until found and before match. I think these are just basically some benchmark that were added. Ensure local props value is read during teardown. Take snippet into account when scoping CSS. So this is also pretty cool. So now basically yeah, let me see the test so that I can show you. Uh, Basically, the point is when yeah, if you have something like this, my snippet, span, stuff like that, now these will actually work as a CSS selector. So basically, if you are using a snippet which render a span inside something, um, like we basically follow the snippet into the snippet to see if there is a span there, so that this before was a new CSS. But since we actually know the HTML template, we can follow inside, which is pretty cool. We also have a couple of breaking changes, which are not really breaking changes because, like, a not and has are scoped now. So, in the beginning, if you had not or has, the scope class for Svelte was not added. But I mean, you probably expect something like this to have the CSS scoping. So now they have. Is technically breaking change is more likely to be a feature for you. Um, Ensure inserted code is preserved during migration. Obviously, we are also working a lot on migrations. This was basically deleting some part of the code that was inserted from another part of the migration, and it was fixed. Ensure each block consistency to internal mutation to the collection. So basically, if you try to mutate the collection, I can't remember specifically actually what this is about. Let's take a look. I think basically. Oh, so okay, it was different from prod to dev. So yeah, cool. Improve derived ownership model. So a derived is owned if you are deriving from within an effect. So it's owned by that effect. But if you don't have, like if you just use a derived inside a module, for example, that's not owned by anyone. And they have different rules, kinda. Ensure a weight block scope transform are isolated. This was basically a problem with the scope. So when you are inside an await block, data weight block only affect the scope inside data weight block. And it was actually going to affect the outer scope, and this PR fixes it. Improve runtime performance of derived signals, which is always nice. Sometimes I bet this is Dominic, because sometimes, yeah, like I love this fact. Like Dominic is like constantly thinking about performance and stuff like that. So one day he wake up and say, "Oh, I know how to make Svelte faster," and it just does it. Do it. We have another couple of breaking changes. One, it's quite like simple. It's just basically using strong enumerated types for attributes. So, for example, for the I don't know for the autocomplete attribute, you only have specific set of strings that you can use, and so now Svelte actually provide you autocomplete for those. This allows state mutation in logic block expression. So this is something that we noticed. Basically, a lot of people were doing something that kind of worked in Svelte 4, but it's very risky, which is mutating something. Like if I do 1, 2, 3, and I want to like loop over this each count, like people were doing count.sort as num, for example, and then print num. And this is absolutely like you need to be very aware of doing this. That's why we literally throw an error for this, because this is in the same effect. So if you consider the each its own effect, it's reading count and mutating count. And so by doing this is basically an infinite loop. And a lot of people actually reported this bug. This is easily fixable by doing toSorted like this. So this works, and it doesn't produce an infinite loop, because if you don't know it, sort actually mutate the array in place and also return the array. Very weird. I was bit by this bug, I don't know how many times, and it's very painful to debug, because if you return something from sort, why would you also mutate the array in place? But it's all JavaScript. We know how it is. So now they are disallowed. So like we basically help you to not do something that could lead to infinite loops. Transition with dynamic components now function correctly. Okay. Use internal set for a wait block. This is something like this breaking change here introduced a small bug for the await block, because it was not using the internal set anymore. Oh, no. Yeah, I think it's this one. So for the await block, it was not using the same internal set, and so it was not correctly tracking this thing. Somebody will find a way to make more infinite loops. Like, yeah, it's one of the goal of every developer: find a way to make it to make it halt. Correctly applies autofocus to static element. So this was basically like, if you know, like if even if you add an element with the autofocus tag on it with JavaScript, it will not autofocus on that thing, which maybe is a good thing. I don't know. Like it seems like safe to do. But I mean, sometimes, like if you are like inside an if and you have an input with an autofocus, that's probably what you want. Like you want that when it's added, it's added to the autofocus, like it actually autofocuses. And it was not working for static elements. So if you don't have any state in it, it was just adding that into the template and without autofocusing on it. So this is now fixed. This is actually kind of a revert of this, because the method attribute for forms is something that a lot of people uses. So if you are using a form like this, it's very common to do something like post, because I mean, like this is a standard HTTP verb. So yeah, technically you should do post per spec, but you can do post, and a lot of people do. And so yeah, we basically backed up from this, allowing a more like case insensitive method. Avoid reporting inspections when an exception occurs. So again, it's always inspect that if you are reporting something and an exception occur, like is not reporting other inspections. It makes sense, because like if an error occurs for some reason, it doesn't make sense to have logs after the error. This is also pretty interesting, because when you run, so when you do Svelte 5 preview, when you are migrating from this to Svelte 5, like in Svelte 4, you could do something like this: count equal count plus 1. And this actually works in Svelte 4, because basically this is one of the main reasons why we switched to runes, because with static analysis reactivity, like in Svelte 4, this was basically like it only runs one per tick, which means that even if I am changing something inside here, um, it doesn't go infinitely. Like it just update once and then it's settled down. So like obviously this means that every time you click, oh, this is probably a bug. That's it's always a bug. But the problem is, like, the point is, whenever you, oh, because I don't have a click actually. So let's do on click is equal to count plus plus. So if I do this, as you can see, like once I added count plus plus here, and the other one comes from here, but it does not spiral into infinite loop, right? If you migrate to Svelte 5, it will add this legacy run, which basically aims to mimic this block, this label block, for a couple of reasons. One, because it will also run on the server. So effects doesn't run on the server, but the label statement will. So with run, it will also like invoke that function on the server. But now with that PR, it's also preventing you from running the same code again, while at the same time give you a warning about this thing. So now this behaved the same, but is also giving you a warning. Hey, if you move this to effect, you will run up in an infinite loop. And we can actually try if you want. So let's say that we do $sign effect, and we move this here, and we move this here. We already, like, since the beginning, we don't even need to click. We are already getting an infinite loop. And the reason for this is obviously because we are reading and writing to the same variable. So this will be an infinite loop. Obviously, there's no reason to write code like this. But it's nice that now run from the migration actually works more closely to the legacy label. And by the way, if you are using this, you will get yelled at by the editor, because this is deprecated and this is Svelte legacy. So don't use it. Like, if you want to move your code, like, move it to runes. Don't use run. There is a question. Why do you want to use that in the first place? What's your case need to do that? What do you mean you use that? Like adding count like this? I agree. Like, you shouldn't write code like this. But I mean, some people do, and it might happen that these introduce some infinite loop with effect. So it's nice that at least the migration can help you, like, migrate your code to runes without actually creating infinite loops that you would have to debug. Better migration for leading and trailing comments. So this is basically like, if with the migration, we are changing your code, obviously. So I just want to show you. Let's say that you have something like this, for example, where you have, I guess I would need to, let's say that you have something like this, where you depend on count. Double is equal count time 2. Like, even if you do something like this, for example, if we detect that let double like this, like, this is basically the same as double is equal count time 2, right? It's basically the same. So what we do is, if we detect that this is basically the same, we migrate to derived. instead of we migrate to derived instead of actually moving to a run block. But this meant that if you had something like a comment here, that would have been deleted. And now we are moving them to the right place, which is nice. Because obviously if you have some comment around, like, it's nice to have them still associated with your code. So yep, that's it. Let's see if SvelteKit has something to do, some chore. Warn when from action responses are lost because SSR is off. Ooh, this is interesting. So I think probably, like, if SSR is false and you try to call a form action, it will get lost because you're not server-side rendering it. That's interesting. I never thought of this, actually. When SSR is disabled, the values error returned from the form action get lost because the CSR shell is always empty. Ooh, that's very interesting. And now it's being worked. Pretty interesting. Add Svelte ESLint parser to the list of migratable dependencies. So actually this was changed because basically if you're using Svelte ESLint parser or ESLint plugin Svelte, it was like the migration script is also upgrading your libraries, and it was not upgrading this, and now it's upgrading ESLint plugin Svelte to the latest, which also in turns use Svelte ESLint parser. Upgrades rollup plugin common.js. Change the default key combo Alt-X to avoid conflict with other combos that started with the previous defaults. So I don't know if you've heard of Vite plugin inspector, but basically, like, it allows you, if you're in a Svelte project in development, you can press a combo that will show you a component. Basically, you can hover over a part of your, like, literal website, and it will show you which component that part comes from. And then you can click, and it will open VS Code for you right at the right place in the code, which is super sweet. But like, the default combo was something different. I can't remember now, and it was conflicting with something, especially on Mac. So yeah, now it's changed. Improved props type for Svelte ESLint parser. Error in snippet with type annotation. Closing bracket new line. No inspect rule. So you can add the no inspect rule to prevent people to run inspect. I mean, you don't really need it because even if you leave inspect in, they will get compiled away by Svelte, but I guess it's fine. Yeah, and that's basically it. So let's move to a quick announcement, which I guess you may know. Tomorrow is Svelte Summit Fall. So we already have the YouTube video on this very channel that you're looking at the thing on. We have a lot of talks, and our MCs, Kevin and Brittany, as usual, Richardis, Ben McCann, a lot of very interesting talks, and I literally can't wait for tomorrow. So, yep, tune in tomorrow. And now I will hide my screen, and I will add a certain person that will present to us its plugin, but it's also like talking about something bigger, like not only his plugin. So you already saw the title of the thing, but Pedro Borges is here, and he developed a plugin for Inertia.js, which is, I never actually used Inertia.js, but I've heard great things about it. and I wanted to take a look at a bit more. So I am very excited about this presentation because Pedro is going to present Inertia and his plugin. And
Awesome. Yeah,
as
thanks
usual,
for inviting
if
me.
you have any question, please drop them in chat because I will take a look there and we can have a Q&A after this. So I will leave you with audio screen and I will leave you the stage for you.
Hey everyone. Yeah, thanks for having me, Paulo. Yeah, I'm a web developer from Brazil. Uh, and I've been involved with Inertia since the beginning, over 5 years now. And it's an exciting time. We have a new version in beta right now. So lots of new features, the same good old stuff improved even. And yeah, I'm excited to share that with you. So if you don't know what inertia is, it's good to talk about like what it's not, what it isn't. Inertia.js is not a framework, so it will not replace your existing server-side or client-side frameworks, but it's designed to work with them. So it's like a thin layer that connects the client and the backend, and it does that via adapters. So when hearing about Inertia.js, you're going to hear about backend adapters and client-side adapters. So right now, we have first-party support for Laravel on the backend, and there's like active community adapters being developed for Rails, Elixir, and I've heard of adapters for Go, .NET, and other Django and other languages and frameworks. And it has first-party support for client-side adapters for React, Vue.js, and Svelte. So what it is. So Inertia allows you to create fully client-side rendered single-page applications without the complexity of modern SPAs. So it does that by leveraging what backend frameworks offer out of the box. So Inertia doesn't do any client-side routing for you. So you are not required to write an API. You can simply continue building controllers, page views like you have always done, and it works great like with many backend frameworks. It's fine-tuned for Laravel, but the other community-supported adapters are like really well developed and fully featured as well. So traditionally, when developing an application, you have it's rendered by the server, and on the back end you have your routes, you have controllers, and from the controllers you do some stuff with your data, you fetch data, and you return a view, and you pass data to that view. So Inertia is designed to work pretty much like that, but on the client side, you can use, it's like a fully client-side application, React, Vue, or Svelte. So it's really interesting. And yeah, let me show that to you. So V2 is around the corner. So if you are checking out Inertia, I recommend that you go to v2.inertiajs.com. We have docs for most of the new stuff already. If you're interested in the project, you can check out the repo or the Discord channel. A lot of people willing to help there as well. So to demo Inertia, I created this simple personal finance tracking app. So it's very basic, not data heavy, but it does a good job like demonstrating Inertia features. So it always starts with page components. So let me show what controller. So here I'm using Laravel for the backend, but as I said, it works with other languages and frameworks. So let me go to the transaction controller actually. So on the index method, instead of returning a view page, so using like the template engine for Laravel and passing data to that view, I'm using this inertia helper. and I'm passing the page component name. So this is exactly the same as Svelte component inside my resources.js /js/pages. So I can show you here transactions in index. And the second argument is the data that I want to pass to that page component. So let's see what that component looks like. And you're going to see that it's just Svelte with very little added by Inertia. So I have my imports, and I have this transactions prop, set a title, and then I have the rest of the page. And down here, I'm looping through the transactions data. And I have some links right here. So that's page components. And the next thing that you're going to be using a lot if you try out Inertia.js is the link component. But for Svelte, we also have this inertia action that you can attach to anchor elements or buttons. So when you add use inertia, inertia will start intercepting any clicks on this link. And it will, instead of rendering the page on the backend, it will send the request as an XHR request. And on the back end, it has a middleware that will take care of the request there. And once I return the page component name and the props from my controller, Inertia will swap the component on the client side and inject the new props. So here I have Inertia, use Inertia. I pass an href. So this is just adding the route for transactions added. And down here, we have another example using a button. And here you can see that the action can take some visit options. So for the button, I can pass href as an option. I can define which method it should use for the request. And we have a couple of other options like preserve scroll. So when I click to delete a transaction, it will not scroll to the top of the page. And I'm also specifying that I only want the transactions property updated. So Inertia will not send any other props after this action takes place. So let me show how that works in practice. So here we have our transactions list. So if I click to delete and confirm, so it's deleted. So what Inertia did, it sent an XHR request to the backend. The transaction was deleted. And then let me actually show because it's really cool. So I delete the transaction and I redirect back to the transactions index. So another thing that Inertia does is it understands when on the backend you are redirecting, and it will redirect on the client side the proper way. So it will grab the page component for the redirected page, fetch the props for that, and do that seamlessly for you, so you don't even notice. So let me click to edit this one. So let's talk about forms. Inertia provides a form helper. So it helps you initialize your form data. It also provides some very helpful methods like post, put, delete, and also methods for resetting your data, setting it back to the defaults. It also has properties for checking if the form data is dirty or not, and also has properties for the submitting status. So if you submit a form, you can check on this form store if it's processing the request or not, like for disabling the button. So let me, I think I need to just throttle the network here. So if I click save, you can see it's disabled. On the back end, we updated the transaction, redirected back to the transactions index, and yeah, it just works. Another thing, let me go to add a new transaction, is validation. So on the client side, I don't need to use any library for handling validation. I can leverage what the backend provides for me. So here I can just submit the form without filling it out. The data was validated on the backend. The backend it didn't pass the validation, so it returned errors, and these errors comes as props, and we can just display it on the appropriate field. So let me just fix this. Groceries, and now I can save it. Okay, got some errors there. There shouldn't be, but yeah, let me show how what this form helper it looks like. So here I have my transaction form component. It's a separate component because I use it for create and edit transactions. So it takes a transaction as prop, and here is the form helper provided by Inertia. You can define the data here, and form is a store. So that's how you can use it. So let me scroll to the markup here. So this is a bit more complicated for the date component, but for the other ones is fairly simple. So we have bind value, and we can bind it to a form amount. Form description, we can bind the value to this input as well. And then we have a category for a radio group. And on the buttons, you can see I'm using the property just for checking if it's processing. In that case, I disable the buttons. And on the form, we have this submit handler. So I just prevent the default. And if it's an existing transaction, I will fire a put request to this route. And I'm preserving scroll if it throws any error, so it doesn't scroll to the top of the page. It stays at the same place. And the same thing when I'm creating a new transaction. So this is the form helper. And there's another thing. Inertia was created with the goal of behaving exactly like the browser behaves for server-side render apps. And that's manifested in this library in many ways. And one of that is with adding this key to the form helper. What this does is persist the form data in the history session, history state, so that if you leave the page and come back, you had like fill out some of the form, the data will still be there. So let me show that. So yeah, I filled 100 groceries. It failed. I can go to another page and come back. Let me try once more. Okay, it's not working. I'm using the beta version. I caught 2 bugs. Not sure why it's not working here, but that's what it should do. So let's move on. So we talked about form, validation, remember state. The other thing that Inertia does, you just refresh the page here. Maybe I messed with something. Try that once more. Okay, yeah, something's broken. Yeah, I'll look that up after this. So the other thing in this theme of trying to behave as the browser would for a traditional app is scroll restoration. So let's say I scroll to this point on my screen, and I come here to edit. If I come back, it takes me to the exact same place. So again, it's persisting the scroll position in history state, so it can restore that when I come back to the page. Yeah, another thing, we talked about page components, but Inertia also provides a way for you to add persistent layout. So here at the top, we have this header. So it's persisted across all the page components while I'm authenticated. And of course, we don't want to be rendering that whenever we switch pages. And also because this may also have some state. So the search form is not implemented, just here to demo this. So let's say I input some search here. If I navigate to another place, come back, it stays the same. So it will, layouts, persistent layouts, they will receive props, the same props as all other pages. So they are reactive. Whenever a prop change, it will change its state if needed, but they are persisted. So that also helps with performance. Okay, so I think this covers a lot of the features that Inertia have had since version 1. And as I mentioned, we now have beta 2. The team just released beta 2, the beta 2 of version 2 last night. And what it does is, so one problem we had before, because Inertia always tries to behave to mimic the default behavior from browsers, is that whenever you click the link, it would fire a request. So while that request is processing, if you clicked another link, it would cancel the first one and process the second. That's what browsers does for us traditional websites. But that limited features that people have been asking. So Jonathan Reinink, the creator, and Joe Tannenbaum, they have like rewrote the router of Inertia.js to support async requests. And that has enabled a whole set of new features like polling, deferred props, prefetching, fetching data only when it's visible in the viewport, and things like that. So let me talk about prefetching. I'm gonna open my DevTools. Let me just remove this. Also, let me just check that I haven't removed that. Okay, so going back to the Inertia link, I have added the prefetch true option to the dashboard link and also to the transactions link here at the top. So I accidentally hover it and it did it. So let me do it again. So you notice as I hover dashboard, it will prefetch that page. So when I click, it's cached and ready to go. So this is really cool. By default, when you just use prefetch true, it will prefetch on hover, but you also have the option to prefetch on click, which will prefetch on mouse down. But and also there's the option to prefetch on mount. And you have control over the cache limit. So by default, it will cache the page for 30 seconds. And if you click after 30 seconds, it will get a fresh copy. But if you click within that 30 seconds, it will just serve the cached page. And you also can provide another value. So in case you hover, it prefetched the page and it passed like that fresh period that you set. You can set another limit. And if you click within that other limit, what Inertia will do, it will serve you the cached, the stale cached version of the page. But then in the background, it will get like a fresh copy and update the props in the background you barely notice, but we also have a utility that you can use like to show a load indicator or something. So that's prefetching. Also, we have deferred props. So if you notice, when I go to the dashboard, this data load slowly, and that's not because inertia is slow. I'm slowing it down on purpose here. So let me show the dashboard controller. Yeah, so deferred props, you can mark a prop on the backend adapter as deferred. And what it will do is you have this callback. So Inertia will not evaluate this callback on the first render. It will just serve all the other props. So you can, the user will see the page immediately. Then as soon as the initial page loads, it will fire another request to fetch the deferred data. So that's exactly what it's doing here. And actually it supports like deferred groups. So here I have one group and here I have another. I'm delaying this a bit more. So we have this deferred component that I'm gonna show you right now. So if we go to the dashboard component, page component, you can see here I'm just importing the income and expenses properties and latest transactions. Those are all deferred, so they will be empty on the first load. And I'm using this deferred component, and then I can specify which data it refers to. And I provide a fallback snippet. So I'm showing the skeleton while it's loading. And as soon as the data is available, we show the default slot. So same thing for expenses, but for the third card, I specify two deferred groups, so income and expenses. So it will wait until both are available, then display the default slot. So just doing that once more, this first, second, and then at the same time. So this is deferred. This is like, will really help data heavy applications to feel more snappy. So pages that have a lot of props, a lot of things going on, now they don't have to load everything in one go. You can defer them. And the other thing is the when visible component. So this uses the intersection observer API. So it will only load this data when the when visible component enters the viewport. So let me show how that looks on the backend. So for deferred, we use inertia deferred and pass a callback. And for when visible, we use inertia optional. So the difference between deferred and optional is that deferred will be loaded as soon as the page loads first. So inertia will initiate a request to fetch this data. But for optional, inertia won't do anything automatically. You have to ask for that data at a later moment. So in this case, just when this component enters the viewport. So let me go back to the dashboard index page component. And I can show you, we have this when visible. We have the buffer option to define like the offset of when it should, before this element enters the viewport, and then we start loading the data. And also the data properties, so latest transactions. This also allows you to provide a fallback slot, and then we have the content for that. So let me show once more. So we load this here, and we can inspect the network tab. So as soon as we enter that, it fires the request, and we can see on the response that it's only returning the latest transactions props. Errors is always available. just in case. But and what Inertia does, it grabs this and it will merge with the props it already has available on this page. On this page. So that's when visible. Polling is another utility we just added. I haven't included it in my demo, but basically it allows you just a nice helper to allow you to keep polling data from your server if you're not using WebSockets. So it auto starts. It's configured to auto start by default. You can set that to start it manually, and it will stop polling as soon as the component is destroyed. Okay, so I think I have one last thing to show, actually two. So if you haven't noticed, I'm running this command. Actually, this is just a shorthand, but it's PHP artisan inertia column start SSR. So Inertia supports SSR. Let me go to a page that doesn't have a lot of data. So if I force reload and inspect here, we can see that it sent actual JavaScript from the server, and Inertia is hydrating, have Svelte hydrate that data once the client side is ready to kick off. And the way it does it, you run this command on your server, you set it to a daemon, and it will run a node process. And the backend, the Laravel backend, talks to the node process, grabs like the whole HTML and serves that on the first render. So Inertia is also suitable for applications that need to support SEO and public-facing pages as well. And yeah, and the last thing, this is a bonus. This is not actually Inertia, but if you have noticed, you have seen that I have some TypeScript types for the props that are coming from the backend. And this will depend like on the backend adapter, if it supports it or not. This is also not something that Laravel supports out of the box. But I want to show you the transaction controller. So from this controller, I'm returning an index page. And this index page is basically a data object. So I'm using a third-party library for that. So I define on this data object what property it should have, that it's a paginated data collection, and it's a collection of transaction data. So this is another data object that defines like the individual transaction. So if we inspect that, you can see we have ID, description, amount, and category. And category is in type, enum type. And I can also define like some transformation for the date and casting. So this data object, it works for a lot of things, can be confusing at first. It works for validating data when it's coming from the client side before I'm saving. So it validates the data for me. It also serves when I grab the data from the database and I want to pass it to the front end, but I don't want to include every property. I want to transform it in some way. It works for that as well. And the third thing, it can, with another package, it can generate the TypeScript for this data object that you can use on the client side. So on my vid file, I have this run block, and you can see that it keeps running PHP artisan TypeScript transform. So it will look for data objects and page objects that I define on my backend, and it will generate the TypeScripts for those inside JavaScript types generated. So for example, here for the pages, I have the create page, so transaction, app data, transaction data. And if I go to one of these components, so you get like that nice TypeScript auto suggestion and just another way to ensure that your data is type safe. So let me go to index transactions. So yeah, right here where I look through this, so you can see that a paginated collection contains like the data, also the links, and some other metadata for the pagination. Data is an app data, transaction data, and here I have it. So for everything, I have yeah, types for everything. Yeah, I think this covers all. Are you still there, Paulo?
Yes, I was waiting for you to finish to jump back in.
For a
Uh,
split second, I thought maybe I've been talking to myself for
oh no,
a
no,
long
no.
time and
I would
nobody's.
never do. So, pretty interesting. I think like it has a lot of similarities with SvelteKit itself. Like the type generation, even like the fact that you're passing props to a Svelte component. So it's kind of like a SvelteKit for PHP, which, by the way, like has like a small place in my heart because like I started with PHP. Actually, I started with PHP 4 17 years ago. It's a lot.
Oh, yeah, that's a long.
We didn't even have classes in PHP when I started. So yeah, it's pretty cool. And it's very, very interesting. It does a lot of stuff that I think it really makes sense. And from what I can, like, from what I've seen, like, it's still encourage progressive enhancement, I think. Like, but with the user inertia on links, which means that if you are not actually using inertia, like it will still navigate normally.
Correct.
And I guess also like form submission and stuff like that. So it's something that I think Svelte did very right, and I think like I love that more frameworks are actually like embracing the same thing. And it's cool to also have the option because obviously maybe you already have a PHP backend and you want to use Svelte, so this is a good way to connect the two. I wonder like how does this work with like I don't, because I know that Laravel is like probably if you have Laravel, you already have a way to connect to Svelte in a different, like you don't need inertia probably. I'm not very familiar, but I don't know if with Laravel you would need inertia, but like how would this connect to like some other framework in PHP?
Uh, for you mean inertia or a Svelte app? Just
Inertia.
regular.
Inertia.
Okay, for inertia, you need to have a backend adapter.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if there are adapters for Symfony, which is another popular PHP framework.
Mm-hmm.
But we have adapters for Rails, Elixir, and these other are community supported. Also .NET Go. At my previous job, we used Rails, not Rails, Ruby, but not with Rails, and we had another gem for doing routing, and we created an adapter for that. And down the road, we ported the backend app to Laravel to take advantage of like all the features it offers out of the box. And
Mm-hmm.
we did that without barely touching on the front end. So it was pretty much plug and play and just like switching like prop names because conventions in between the two frameworks were different. But other than that, like it pretty much worked. So yeah. So if you can think of inertia as a protocol that the
Yeah.
client side talks to the backend. So if you implement that protocol on the backend, you can get it to work with any of the client side adapters that Inertia offers.
That's pretty cool because like I think the adapter pattern is generally like a very strong pattern that we've seen used a lot. Like SvelteKit is using it for deploying everywhere, but I think in general, more libraries should like use the adapter pattern because I think it's a very powerful like concept. So I think
Yes.
we have some question. So yeah, we have like, so you use inertia to make MVC in SvelteKit, which like maybe like we can probably say this. And feel free to answer like if you want. In the meantime, I will obviously some uh, demo courses are real, but you handled it very very well. Don't like people
Thank
like
you.
often like people often panic when something goes wrong, but at the end of the day, like it happened to me, and at the end of the day, like it's something like we are all humans. It's fine. I just shrug it off like you did and go ahead. Um, question from SRG. We should like I know that is uh, Sir Generoso. Okay, so my understanding is that Inertia make your web an SPA regardless of front back framework. If JS fail in the browser, has Inertia fallback and it becomes an NPA. I guess yes. That's basically what I was talking about. Like it fully supports progressive enhancement, right?
Right.
You also have like it doesn't exactly work with SvelteKit routing because Inertia take over the routing inside of things. It is compatible with Svelte itself. So probably like you could technically write an adapter for SvelteKit, right? But
Um,
I don't know if it will make sense because obviously like you would basically just use server endpoint instead of
yeah,
uh,
I think it wouldn't make much sense because there are like some feature overlaps between the two.
yeah.
You can I can like show two scenarios of like if you are going to use SvelteKit with Laravel. So it's great that SvelteKit already provides routing, uh, but you're going to have to write like the API endpoints on Laravel. You're going to have to think about authentication. So what are you going to use for authentication? We're storing authentication token or session on the client. So those are problems that you don't have to worry when using Inertia,
Mhm.
because using Inertia, the backend authenticates the same way as always. It stores a session in the cookie.
Mhm.
So if you log out, you no longer have access to the protected pages. Uh, the client side doesn't have to know anything about session management. You also don't have to write API endpoints. So you use the same routing as you have been using for regular web apps. So I think that's like a big distinction between the two. So you can use SvelteKit with Laravel, but I don't think you would use need Inertia for that. But then there are a lot of features that Laravel provides out of the box that you would need to be implemented some part of it on the client side as well. So it's extra work for you to do that.
Yeah. One question that Feva had is it takes over the routing with user-inertial links, but the server-side rendering is still handled by SvelteKit, right? And I guess the answer to this is no, because like there's no SvelteKit. So I guess like the server-side rendering is still handled by Laravel or Inertia for it, like in the sense that they are rendering the component on the server using the Svelte server API probably, and then
Yeah,
properly.
that for server side rendering, that's just on the initial request. For the subsequent request, Inertia takes over and it's just sending
Yeah.
XHR requests after that,
Yeah.
and it's passing the page component name and all the data that the Svelte adapter on the client needs to pass to that component.
I wonder how one can debug this type of integration. I've never used Laravel. Uh, I mean, I guess at the end of the day, it's just a front end and a back end. Like, so the front end you will debug it in in the browser, and the back end you will debug it in the uh, in your terminal console, just like Node.js, basically.
If you notice when I try to save, no first. So there's some error, probably with casting. So debugging is not a pain because when the client side of Inertia receives a request that was not sent by the Inertia backend adapter, so this is sent by Laravel, so it's like HTML and everything. So it has this modal, so it will display the page for you. So while in development, so this is very handy. So I can just check out like the error trace and trace log, and then that makes debugging errors from the backend very easy using Inertia. And for the client side, yeah, it's just here. It's just a Svelte app, so errors will pop up in the console. And it's pretty straightforward to figure it out from there.
Yeah. One question more closely related to your work is, if I'm currently using Inertia 1.0, 1 point star, can I just upgrade to 2.0 and everything should work as is, or are there any migration instruction to do so?
The docs for Svelte, I had a PR open updating the docs for the Svelte adapter, but it's pretty much the same. There's just some minor changes, and I think Inertia.js. Yes, I think if I have a local copy working here, I can show you. So I don't think this is live yet, but no, I don't think I'm on the right branch. Yeah, it's just some small change to your app.ts file here on the setup callback to get it to work with Inertia 2.0. And also on the ssr.ts, there's some changes to the setup callback. And yeah, and once that PR is merged, the documentation for Inertia will provide, let's say you are on the client side installation. So it will have instructions for Svelte 4 and Svelte 5. I didn't mention, but the adapter is still written in Svelte 4, but we've made sure that it supports both versions, like all the features that I demoed, and yeah, they are supported by both versions, including SSR render.
Yeah, pretty cool, pretty cool. Okay, I think like there was a lot of questions, so like I think people loved it, and I certainly loved it. Thank you very much for presenting, and thank you guys. Like today we cut short because I mean it's still 1 hour and 15 minutes, so I talked too much. But tomorrow, tune in on this very channel for the Svelte Summit because it will be awesome. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye,
Thanks for
guys.
having me. Bye,
Bye
everyone.
bye.